Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring something truly astonishing, really at the intersection of technology and biology. We're diving into this question: can your brain actually launch a full-scale biological defense system, a real immune response, before a germ even gets near you?
It sounds pretty wild, almost like sci-fi, right? But the research is solid.
Yeah, the evidence seems really rigorous.
Exactly. Our deep dive today is based on this fascinating study that used, well, everything research in virtual reality, advanced brain imaging like EEG and fMRI, and even detailed immune monitoring. We're going to show you how just sensing a potential threat can trigger a proactive, coordinated neuroimmune response.
And it all hinges on when that threat crosses this sort of invisible line around your body.
Precisely. That's the key moment.
Okay, so this invisible line, it's like a functional boundary for us.
No.
Before we actually jump into the VR part, let's define the key players. What do we call this biological boundary?
Right, so that's the peripersonal space, usually shortened to PPS.
Mhm.
Think of it like your brain's built-in radar system. It's constantly active. It's the space immediately around your body, maybe about arm's length, and it's mapped by specific neurons in the frontoparietal areas of your brain. Its main job, integrating what you sense approaching, like seeing something coming closer with actual touch on your skin.
So it's designed purely to anticipate contact, maybe even harm.
That's its core function, yeah, anticipation.
So it's not just about how far away something is, but more about the brain calculating risk based on how close it might get to touching me.
Okay, if the PPS is the radar, who are the immune system's first responders we should be watching?
For this, we're focusing on the innate lymphoid cells, or ILCs. These are really fundamental parts of your innate immunity.
The fast-acting part.
Exactly. The part that doesn't need prior exposure to an antigen, it just acts fast. When a threat's detected, ILCs mobilize super quickly. They're like the immune system's rapid deployment force.
Got it, ILCs. Okay, let's unpack the experiment itself. The researchers, they needed a way to make the body believe a virtual threat was real enough to react to, right? Yes, and they used virtual reality for that. They exposed participants to 3 different kinds of avatars approaching them in VR. One was neutral, just sort of there. Another was fearful, meant to be generally threatening, but not sick.
Okay, like maybe someone angry or startling.
Right. And the third type was infectious. This avatar showed clear signs of sickness, coughing, looking visibly unwell, contagious.
And how do they measure that PPS boundary, the personal bubble?
They used a really clever method. It's called the multisensory task. So participants would see one of these avatars approaching them in VR. At the same time, they'd get a light, sudden touch on their face. Their job was just to click a button as soon as they felt that touch.
Wait, hang on. How does clicking a button when you feel a touch measure the size of this space?
It's all about the reaction speed. See, if you visually perceive something approaching your face, your brain instinctively starts priming itself for potential contact.
Oh.
So when the touch actually happens, your reaction time is faster, measurably faster than if you just felt that same touch without seeing anything approach. That speed up, that's the multisensory facilitation effect.
Right, like swatting a fly you see landing versus one that just appears.
Exactly like that. And the distance where the speed up effect starts to happen tells you how big your protective PPS bubble is at that moment.
Okay, makes sense. So what happened to the bubble when the sick-looking, the infectious avatar approached?
Well, this is where it got really interesting because of how specific the effect was. The infectious avatars, and only the infectious ones, caused the PPS effect to, well, expand significantly. It reached out to much farther distances than baseline.
Wow, so if I see someone who looks really sick, maybe coughing a lot, even if they're way across the room, my brain might subconsciously, inflate my personal space, give me more reaction time.
That's exactly what the data suggests. This is the behavioral immune system in action. It's this deep survival mechanism calculating the potential risk of infection and preemptively expanding that functional boundary. It shows the PPS anticipating potential contact way before it happens.
Okay, that's the behavior sorted. The bubble gets bigger for infectious threats. Now, let's look under the hood, neurologically speaking. We know the behavior changes, but when does the brain first flag this specific type of threat, and where is that happening?
So for the when, they used high-density EEG. It gives incredible timing precision. And they found this specific neural signature, basically a difference in the brain's electrical activity pattern when comparing the infectious avatar to the neutral one.
And how fast was this?
Remarkably fast. The difference emerged between 129 and 150 milliseconds after the avatar appeared.
Whoa, 150 milliseconds.
Yeah.
You told me earlier blinking takes, what, 300 or 400?
That's right. So this detection is happening faster than a simple blink, faster than many reflexes. It's really, really quick.
And where did the EEG point?
The source localization pointed straight to the parietal areas, which totally fits, as that's where the PPS system is primarily located. But here's the crucial bit. This super fast signature was triggered when the avatar was still far away.
Not even close yet.
Not even close. So the brain is identifying and anticipating the type of threat, specifically an infectious one, way before it poses any immediate physical danger. It's truly anticipatory.
Okay, so that's when incredibly fast parietal lobes. Now, for the wearer, that's where fMRI comes in, right?
Yeah.
Pinpointing the actual brain regions.
Exactly. fMRI shows us the activated structures, and when they looked at the brain activity, specifically for that far infectious condition comparing infectious to neutral avatars when they were still distant, they saw activation in predictable places like the somatosensory cortex, which processes touch, and the premotor cortex for action prep.
Makes sense, preparing for contact or avoidance.
Right. But the really key finding was the activation of major nodes within the salience network.
Ah, the salience network. We've talked about that before. It's like the brain's priority filter, command center for what's important.
That's a great way to put it. It detects and filters stimuli that are, well, salient, important, relevant, potentially threatening. The specific nodes lighting up here were the anterior insula, the AINS, and the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
So what's the connection? How do the PPS and salience network work together here?
The thinking is that the PPS system, our personal radar, feeds its threat assessment specifically about an approaching infection threat directly into the salience network. The salience network then flags this as high priority, crucially distinguishing it from just a generic scary thing like the fearful avatar, and it starts preparing the body for a targeted response.
Okay, wow. So we've traced it from a virtual image to a split-second neural detection to the brain's priority command center lighting up. Now for the really big question. Does all this brain activity actually trigger a physical systemic immune response, like in the body?
Yes. And honestly, this is where the study just becomes incredible. To see if the virtual threat measured up to a real biological challenge, they included a vaccine cohort. These participants got a standard flu shot.
Why a vaccine?
It serves as an ethically sound way to mimic a real pathogen exposure to trigger a known immune response that they could compare against.
Okay, so comparing the immune reaction to a VR avatar versus an actual vaccine, what happened with those ILCs, the first responders we talked about?
The results were, frankly, stunning. They found that both groups, the ones facing the virtual infection in VR and the ones getting the actual vaccine, showed a similar strong modulation of their ILC frequency and activation.
Similar? You mean the virtual threat triggered an immune change comparable to a real shot?
Comparable in terms of the pattern and strength of ILC modulation, yes. Stronger than the response to the neutral or even the fearful avatars. A virtual cue was potent enough to mimic a genuine physical inoculation signal, at least in this early phase of immunity.
Hold on, my body might actually be mobilizing immune cells, using up energy, based on something that looks sick in a video game. That's mind-blowing, and maybe a little worrying.
It is pretty incredible. It highlights how deeply ingrained these protective mechanisms are.
So how exactly did the ILCs respond? What was the specific change?
They observed a clear mechanism. There was a significant decrease in the frequency, the number, of a specific subset called ILC1s found circulating in the blood.
Fewer ILC1s in the blood.
Right. But importantly, this decrease happened alongside a higher activation index for the ILC1s that were still in the blood.
Okay, what does that combination, fewer cells but higher activation, actually mean is happening?
It strongly suggests activation-induced migration. The ILC1s aren't just disappearing, they're actively moving out of the bloodstream.
Moving where?
Likely into tissues, places like the lungs, the gut lining, the mucosal surfaces, the body's front lines. They're deploying to prepare for a potential viral attack. Your immune system is literally putting troops on alert, positioning them in key areas based solely on seeing a threat.
That completes the loop then. Virtual sight leads to real immune deployment. But how? How does the brain's salience network alarm actually send that order down to the immune cells floating around in my body? What's the communication channel?
Right, we need that biological pathway. And the likely candidate, the main communication highway, involves the body's central stress regulator, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. the HPA axis.
The classic stress response system.
Exactly. And the hypothalamus is the crucial hub linking the nervous system, where the salience network operates, to the endocrine system, which controls hormone release, including stress hormones that influence immunity.
So did the study actually map this brain-to-hypothalamus communication?
They did. They used a sophisticated technique called dynamic causal modeling, or DCM. It lets you model the influence different brain regions have on each other.
Okay, and what did DCM show?
It revealed a very specific change. When participants viewed the far infectious avatars, remember, the ones still at a distance, that there was an immediate upregulation, an increase in the effective connectivity between those key salience network regions we talked about, the insula, the ACC, and the hypothalamus.
So the salience network detects the specific threat and basically sends a high-priority alert straight down to the hypothalamus, telling the HPA axis, okay, time to initiate a systemic change.
That's the interpretation, yes. The salience network acts as the upstream trigger for the HPA response in this context.
And did they confirm the downstream effects? The actual chemical changes in the body?
They did. They measured 3 key groups of signaling molecules in the blood. First, HPA-related hormones, things like cortisol. Second, eicosanoids, which are involved in local inflammation and attracting immune cells. And third, neuroinflammatory factors.
Okay, so hormones, inflammation signals, and neurofactors.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they found a simple link, like maybe high cortisol leads to ILC mobilization?
That's what you might expect, right? A straightforward connection. But surprisingly, no. Simple linear regressions, just looking for direct correlations, failed to connect any single one of these mediator groups strongly to the ILC activation they observed.
Really? So it wasn't just one chemical signal pulling the trigger?
Apparently not. It suggested the relationship wasn't just a simple A leads to B. It was more complex, maybe like a combination lock or a recipe, a nonlinear code.
A biological secret recipe. I
Oh.
like that. How did they crack it then?
They turned to machine learning. Specifically, they used a type of neural network model. And this model was incredibly successful. It managed to explain a huge 71% of the variance in ILC activation.
71%. That's massive. So the neural network figured out the secret recipe.
It did. It discovered that maximizing ILC activation wasn't about just high or low levels of one thing. It required a very specific combination of signals.
And what was that magic combination? What was the chemical hotspot for peak immune readiness?
The model predicted the highest ILC activation occurred with a precise mix. High levels of HPA-related hormones combined with low levels of neuroinflammatory factors and intermediate levels of eicosanoids. Not too high, not too low on those.
Wow. High stress hormones, low neuroinflammation, and medium eicosanoids. That's specific.
Extremely specific. And here's the clincher. When they looked at the actual blood samples, the participants who had been exposed to the virtual infection threat, their biochemical profiles significantly clustered right inside that precise hotspot identified by the model.
That is just definitive proof, isn't it? A purely virtual cue, seeing a sick avatar breach your perceived personal space, created this unique physiological cocktail in the blood, and that specific cocktail was sufficient to drive the mobilization of these frontline immune cells. The same kind of mobilization triggered by an actual vaccine.
It really ties it all together. It demonstrates that the instant an infection cue seems to breach that functional PPS boundary, your brain doesn't just notice, it kicks off this highly specific, multi-system neuroimmune reaction, all designed to get your body ready for a fight before any actual contact happens.
So recapping the whole chain, your peripersonal space system detects the potential boundary breach. The salience network flags it specifically as an infection threat. This signal travels down to the hypothalamus, activating the HPA axis, which then orchestrates this very precise chemical hotspot in your bloodstream.
Which in turn results in the mobilization, the deployment of your innate lymphoid cell defenders. It's a beautifully integrated system.
It really is. And it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This whole anticipatory defense response aligns perfectly with what biologists call the smoke detector principle.
The smoke detector principle.
Yeah, the idea is that for survival critical systems, like detecting fire or infection, it's evolutionarily much cheaper to have a system that sometimes gives false alarms reacting when there's no real danger than to have one that fails to react when there is real danger. A false negative, missing a real threat, could be fatal.
So better safe than, biologically speaking. Our immune system would rather gear up unnecessarily for a virtual threat than risk being caught unprepared by a real one.
Precisely. It's exquisitely sensitive to cues that resemble symptoms or contamination, even if those cues are just pixels on a screen. VR proved powerful enough to be that convincing cue.
This research really opens up some massive implications, especially for us living so much of our lives digitally now. Knowing that these potential purely anticipatory threats, even just images, can trigger a tangible physical immune response. Well, makes you wonder, how might constant exposure, say through news feeds or social media, to images of sickness, contamination, or even just general threat cues, be subtly tweaking your body's baseline immune readiness or your long-term stress levels?
That's a profound question. What are the cumulative effects of living in a world saturated with virtual threat signals?
Definitely something worth thinking about long after this deep dive is over.